My name is Volker Boege. I am a senior research fellow with the Toda Peace Institute in charge of the Institute's workstream on climate change, conflict and peace in the Pacific. And with me today is Dr. George Carter. George works with the Department of Pacific Affairs at the Australian National University, ANU, and he is director of ANU's Pacific Institute. He is originally from Samoa, and in his village in Samoa, he holds the Matai chiefly title of Sala. George, great to have you with us today. Thank you for taking your time. I forgot to mention that you are also a regular with COP meetings, and you are going to attend COP28 in Dubai later this month. So given that COP will take place in the United Arab Emirates, which is one of the largest oil-producing countries, and it's under the presidency of the CEO of the United Arab Emirates National Oil Company, what do you expect from this COP? And why do you think it is important to be present in Dubai in your position as a director of this Pacific Institute?
Thank you very much, Volker, for this invitation to speak on this podcast in relation to COP28. So I attend these COP as part of the Pacific Regional Organizations mechanism called the One Crop Plus. And this is a group of regional organization specialists and experts that provide technical advice to negotiators from the 14 Pacific Island states. And we also provide support to the political champions from the Pacific. So we are there to guide, support, and as well as provide research. So I'm the only non-regional organization representative in this, as well as other members of and supporters. So the reason why One Crop supports the Pacific Coalition, political grouping called Pacific.s, this year is a vital year for COP. Every year is a vital year for COP, but this year more especially because it's the global stocktake on the Paris Agreement. It's been 3 years since the Paris Agreement has started, and this is sort of the monitoring role, whether countries are keeping up with their contributions through their NDCs, and in a way, are we reaching our goal of maintaining the 1.5 long temperature goal? So it's fundamental whoever hosts that the Pacific are represented because the Pacific pushes the environmental integrity, where all other nations, oil producing countries may be trying to slow down the process of emissions. The Pacific pushes the goal of environmental integrity, that is keeping up with the science and traditional knowledge of that maintaining the 1.5 degree, ensuring that we have enough support for adaptation, especially for countries who are at the front line, and that there is pressure on countries to cut emissions. And so the beauty of the multilateral process is that within the climate change, it's not through voting, it's a consensus. And so you're trying to find the best way forward. So in this case, you have countries like UAE who may be saying, we would like to phase out slowly fossil fuels. But you have countries from the Pacific says, no, we want no more fossil fuels. It needs to end. And so what you'll find is somewhere in the middle, or somewhere you'll find some way of moving forward, because we do need all countries, especially oil-producing countries, and especially companies. This is where we're not saying it's the perfect mechanism, but we have a platform, an opportunity here to draw in oil-producing countries and countries who are producing coal and exporting coal like Australia. We're also able to draw in companies to be a part of this international multilateral dialogue to try and find a way. Or else, if we don't, there's no mechanism that sort of allows us to, what we don't like the word control, but encourage countries to push this. So the voice of Pacific countries, the voice of moral compassion, the voice of lived reality of climate impacts every day, not just every day, but extreme weather impacts, are fundamental to not only the dialogue, but the discourse on global climate change negotiations.
Thank you, George. And you are also a champion of what you call a new Pacific diplomacy. So can you explain a little bit what you mean by new Pacific diplomacy, also in comparison to conventional ways of doing diplomacy? And how is this significant for interventions at an event like COP28?
I would say the champions of New Pacific diplomacy are those who are engaged in diplomacy, people like Anote Tong or climate change negotiators. This concept came up through a project when evaluating the trends and the type of diplomatic engagements and interventions performed by Pacific Island states after 2006. And we see that this growth of agency of Pacific countries, leaders, and also coalitions who are able to engage in the multilateral process. And I argue within climate change, this is one avenue or platform where we see this engagement, where they are able to work together in solidarity. They're able to prepare themselves and strategize as a collective. It's the same as how the European Union engages in these negotiations. They engage throughout the year as all members of the EU, and when they come to the negotiations, they're one force. It's the same thing that's happening in the Pacific. So New Pacific diplomacy talks about this engagement, being able to work together, push forth areas where they have a consensus from the Pacific as regional positions. And part of that engagement are the support of one crop or regional organization or technical experts to guide that work throughout the year to support the countries. And so that's what we've seen, and that's the sort of work that I'm engaged in, both as a research broker, at one end supporting the countries, but at the other end, they know that I'm also researching, capturing this story, how this new Pacific diplomacy is evolving. On top of that is a new area which we're looking to, an oceanic diplomacy, which talks about the indigenous forms of practice that's engaged in this form of New Pacific diplomacy. And that sort of links to some of the work that talks about relationships, the use of culture, how the Pacific Way or how Kava brings back together negotiators to dialogue, or how certain spaces in terms of cultural forms are used to honor senior members or bring forth youth members in to engage in intergenerational dialogues. That's another dynamic that I've also been exploring while engaged in this sort of policy work, exploring the New Pacific diplomacy, which this agency of countries working in solidarity and having a strategy or having strategies working together. And this added layer now of seeing oceanic diplomacy, which we can also say is part of relationality in climate change negotiations for the Pacific.
At the moment, the Pacific leaders are having their meeting in the context of the Pacific Island Forum and the Cook Islands, and I'm sure they will also discuss climate issues. So what do you think are the most pressing issues that these leaders should address and bring to the table in COP28 from a Pacific perspective?
I foresee by the end of this week that we will have some form of declaration from the Pacific leaders. And this is a tradition there's always a climate change call for urgent action declaration that accompanies the communique. And I expect nothing other than a call from this. And so some of these key issues that the leaders will call for: global stocktake, that there's environmental integrity, that it supports the science of 1.5, that pushes greater ambition in terms of adaptation, meeting the goal of global adaptation, that there's much more funding to support specifically Pacific Island countries in their goal of mitigation. In the loss and damage, ensuring that the current discussion on having a new fund that addresses these the impacts of climate change, that this also not only is established, but goes beyond just countries, that local communities have access to. In terms of the ocean nexus, ensuring that there's a greater work plan that looks at incorporating opportunities for to bring in the ocean discussion. But also, I think something that's of great importance to Toda is we see now increasingly the discussions around the fringes of the climate change discussions on peace and security. I noticed that there's quite a few side events that have been promoted and actually supported by the UAE presidency on climate change and security. And it sees this gradual acceptance of the greater UNFCCC community to bring in these discussions, because this is what members ask. This is a multilateral platform where members are pushing for. This is happening to us. They're not just adaptation impacts, but we definitely see the link to tensions in society, the link to actual possibility of risks of these becoming threats to society and threats to the states, and these must be discussed.